Welcome to English Without Borders. Good evening, dear English Without Borders followers who are watching us from Facebook and who are joining us via Zoom platform. So we are very happy to see you. And today we are again very happy to see our speaker. So we are hosting today Faridun Yunusov. Welcome Faridun to English Without Borders webinars. So
Thank you,
and we hope yes that we'll be welcoming you in more webinars in the future. So let me introduce our speaker today. Faridun Yunusov graduated from Khujand State University, Department of Oriental Languages, and he holds his master's degree in linguistics. Faridun has more than 3 years of teaching experience, and he has been working as an English teacher in Access program in public organization Gurdofarid. Faridun has attended a number of conferences and professional development trainings within English Access Micro Scholarship Program and has been awarded with certificates. He is an alumnus of the International Visitor Leadership Program on 21st Century Changemakers, Trend Leaders Promote Social Media Discernment Among Youth 2021. Recently, he participated at the English Without Borders National Conference and Expo on November 19, 2021, and has been awarded with a certificate as one of the winners of the Best Essay Writing Contest. Faridun also had a presentation on teaching English to students with disabilities or making your class more accessible to all students. And today, Faridun will be talking about teaching English to people with disabilities, and he will be sharing his experience on behalf of his organization, Gurdofarid. So welcome, Faridun, and now I'm really glad to give you the floor. Please, you can start your presentation. Thank you very much. And
Yes.
dear audience, yeah, please use this chance to ask your questions to our speaker using the comment box on Facebook and also chat box in Zoom. So we'll be passing them over to our speaker. Thank you very much. Faridun, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, dear Malima. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you a lot for providing such a great opportunity. And also thank you for all participants who are joining us. So today I'll be talking about a very common topic. So that is teaching English to students with disabilities or making your class more accessible to all students. So that means making your class inclusive for all students. So before I start my presentation, I would like to give sites to websites that I use to prepare the materials in this presentation. That is englishclub.com and youtube.com. So youtube.com you can always use to search for materials, for ideas, for live activities. So that is a great resource. So let me start. So some background about students with disabilities. So when we say student with disabilities or students with special needs, mostly we mean physical disabilities or mental disabilities. So our organization has experience working with students with physical disabilities. I'll be talking about it later at the end of my presentation. And in disabilities I wanted to address in my presentation, there are two learning disabilities, or mostly we say learning difficulties. So they are dyslexia and ADD. So that is attention deficit disorder. So dyslexia, we all know about this kind of language disorder. And this picture best illustrates a student with this kind of disorder, with dyslexia. And those students and dyslexia, the word itself, it is a Greek word. So this is difficulty and lexia is language. So these students have difficulties in learning language, in acquisition language. And as you can see, they have difficulties in recognizing symbols, letters, putting letters together and making words, and more difficult to putting words together and making sentences and long, complicated sentences. And students who have this disability or students with dyslexia classroom, most of the time, these students are likely to be attracted by simple things in your classroom, like they could be colorful pictures on the walls, or when student is sitting by the window, and everything that's happening outside the classroom might easily distract the students. Birds flying, trees, flowers, or people going by. So, and for this reason, these students are often labeled as lazy by teachers and by parents who do not understand this difficulty. So, and the role of a teacher here is very important, because teachers who understand this difficulty, they can help these students by using different strategies, different methodologies to help to accommodate their needs. And since the students, even young children who have dyslexic, they will have a lot of difficulties in a classroom, and they will when teachers do not understand the difficulty, they will always indicate the mistakes that they made, and this leads to problems, a lot of problems. And one of the problems is with self-esteem. Their self-esteem goes down, and day by day they do not want to participate in the lesson in the lesson process. And a classroom for those students is a very stressful environment. And the teacher who understands these difficulties can help these students. And even other students can help. They can create a friendly and positive atmosphere in the class. And even adapted curriculum, adapted materials can support these students to succeed. And students with a dyslexic in a language classroom. So for these students, even using a native language, their reading, writing can be very challenging. But imagine learning a completely different language, a new language. This might lead to more challenges, to more difficulties. But there is one fact, that students who have dyslexic, they are likely to learn how to speak a foreign language easily than instead of writing or reading. So try to focus on speaking, because as we mentioned, dyslexic students, it's really challenging for them to write or read, to recognize symbols, to put them together in words and in sentences. So, and one problem is that teachers or parents, even parents, do not understand the difficulties that the children have. And dyslexia usually is diagnosed at young children, at the age of 7 or 8, or even when a child has dyslexia, their parents might not want to reveal that their children have this kind of disorder. So there are some symptoms that may signal that the children have dyslexia. There are a lot of signals, but here I have included the most common ones. So they have students with dyslexia, it is difficult for them to say words that have more than one syllable, or those students feel difficulty when trying to express their thoughts into words. It doesn't mean that when a student doesn't answer a question, doesn't give his or her opinion, it doesn't mean that they have nothing to say. It is just difficult for them to express themselves using words. Or when writing, they often leave vowels, or they rarely use capitalization. And such students have difficulties. They have difficulties to tie their shoes. And or it is difficult for them to concentrate on something, to pay their attention and to concentrate on teachers' instructions. When teachers are giving instructions, long instructions using complicated sentences, or giving a lot of assignments, it is really difficult for them to follow the teacher and concentrate and absorb new instructions and new materials. Or when teacher makes notes or writes something on the board and asks students to copy down in their notebooks, it will be difficult for them even to copy down what is on the board. Or even when they are reading, when they are asked to read, they skip the words. So these symptoms, these difficulties might give a signal that this student might have dyslexia. So it's important for teachers to recognize it, to understand it. And how can teachers help these students? How can they support these students? Of course, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of strategies, and I have, but before I can continue, I wanted to talk about some famous dyslexics. You all know these people, like Muhammad Ali, a very famous professional boxer, Alexander Graham Bell, a very famous inventor, Tom Cruise, you all know him, Tom Cruise, an actor, an American actor, Hollywood actor, Thomas Edison, even Albert Einstein, one of the most famous scientists in physics. He also had dyslexic. Or even Leonardo da Vinci, Steve Jobs, and we can bring many examples of very famous scientists, inventors, actors, actresses, artists even, who had dyslexia. So what I'm trying to say, students who have dyslexics, they only have problems with recognizing symbols, they have problems in writing or reading, but it doesn't mean that they are lack of intelligence or they have any problems of intelligence. And here are some strategies that teachers can use in their classroom to help to support those students who have this form of language disorder. And first of all, of course, it is information. Learn as much as you can about dyslexia, because by knowing, by having enough information about dyslexia, you will know how to adapt your activity, how to adapt the materials to accommodate their needs. And it is also very important when parents collaborate with teachers, when the teacher stays in contact with the parents to collaboration between teacher and the parents is very important. And encourage the students. Always try to give them prize, to encourage them. It is very important if they stay motivated. It is very important to build their confidence. And do not ask the students who have this kind of problem to read aloud in front of classroom. Just if they don't want, if they want, you can let them read aloud, but don't put pressure on them. Don't ask them to read aloud, because as you know, they are afraid, not afraid, but when they make mistakes, they might think that they are not doing well. So it will affect their self-esteem and their confidence. And try to see these students near to the board so they can have a clear vision of the board, of the words, and try to, when you want to write something on the board, try to write big letters. And another good strategy is when you use a lot of audio lessons. When students do not need to read, they just need to listen to a text or to a story, or maybe even watch a video, and provide multisensory lessons. What does that mean? Using more than one sense during your lessons. Like one of the best approaches in teaching mixed ability class, in teaching classes where you have students with learning difficulties and especially dyslexia is using communicative approach and kinesthetic aids. So you all know what kinesthetic aids are. You all know what communicative approach is. And of course, when you want to give handouts, you try to use large fonts, larger than maybe even 20, 22, or even up to 30. Here were strategies for teachers to use in your classroom. And another difficult before I continue, I have one exercise for the participants. Maybe some of you are familiar with this exercise. So we have a short conversation here. I want you to rewrite this conversation using only emojis and symbols. You are allowed to use emojis and symbols to rewrite this conversation. Okay, you can write names, but use only emojis and symbols. So you can use the chat box to write answers. So you have 3 minutes just for doing this exercise. Please write your answers in the chat box. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, here it is. So we have some answers. So you can first put the names and guess. Yes, we can see. So thank you for your answers. So I want to ask you a question. So was it easy or difficult to rewrite these sentences with emojis? How was it like? Was it difficult or was it easy? You can write your answers in the chat box. Yes, a cup of coffee and yes, not difficult. if you have appropriate emojis, or it was clearly difficult? Yes, if you have got appropriate emojis, and if you know the meanings of those emojis, it is, of course, it is not difficult. It's quite easy, and it is more easier than typing the words using letters. Oh, it were at first difficult, but we use it. Yes, you can get used to it. If you use it a lot, you can get used to it, of course. So yes, you are not familiar with all emojis. You don't know the meanings of those emojis. It depends on the abilities. Thank you, Ilham. Yes, you are right. It depends on your abilities, to what extent you are familiar with the meanings of those symbols, of those emojis. Yes, and I just wanted to demonstrate that when you do not know the meanings of the symbols, when you do not recognize what those emojis mean, so it's really difficult to express yourself, or sometimes you might be misunderstood. Instead of using one appropriate emoji, you can use different, and you can be misunderstood. So imagine those students with learning difficulties that they do not recognize the letters. So for us, it is pretty simple to write words, even sentences, but for them, it's really difficult. And when the teacher doesn't understand that difficulty, that student will have really difficult problems. The classroom will become a depressive environment for that student. So it's very important for teachers, first of all, for teachers and for parents as well, to understand that this student needs a special approach in teaching and in learning. He needs completely different methodologies. So thank you all for your answers. Let me continue my presentation and go to the next difficulty that students have, and that is ADD, attention deficit disorder. And most of the time, students who have dyslexia, they also have attention deficit disorder. And what does that mean? It is difficult for those students to pay attention and to stay concentrated for a long time. For us, it may be not for everyone. For us, it may be naturally to stay focused on one thing, on what the teacher is saying. As you can see in this picture, there are two students, and you can understand that the boy, he is having a problem expressing himself. Because the girl, as you can see, her sentence is long and complex, and it is grammatically correct. So yesterday I played the park before I went home for dinner. And the second student, yesterday I played the park. As you can see, his sentence is very short and simple. So it means that students who have this kind of disorder, attention deficit disorder, it is hard for them to understand long and complex sentences as well as to say long sentences. Sometimes they don't pay attention to grammar rules, or it is sometimes, most of the time, it's difficult for them to stay focused on what the teacher is saying or what the other students are saying. And how can we deal with those students? How can we adapt our activities or the materials to the needs of these students, to accommodate their needs? One very good strategy is that when the teacher, when designing an activity, try to use short activities, not long but short activities, or try to split your classroom into small groups and to give them short assignments, not long, or chunk reading assignments. When you have reading assignment and when you have a long passage, divide it into shorter parts and give split your classroom and hand out those short parts of the text, not a whole part, no, a whole passage to all the groups, but each group has different parts of the text. So it will be easier for them to concentrate and to absorb that part of text. And here are some more classroom strategies and best practices. There is one difficulty for teachers because mostly teachers are concerned about finding a balance between accommodating needs of those students who have learning difficulties and not holding behind other students. So because for other students, they might think that if the activity is very simple, if it is short, it might be boring for those students who are doing well in the classroom. But it is important, one activity, one technique, methodology that works well with students with learning difficulties, it will definitely work well with other students. So, and it is important, it is highly advised for teachers not to indicate that a certain materials or certain activities are targeted at an individual or a group of students in the classroom. So it will help to create an inclusive classroom, an accessible atmosphere for all students. So do not indicate that because of this student, because of this group of students, I have adapted this activity to meet their needs. Just do your best, just conduct those activities. And these are only best practices that will work well both with students with learning difficulties and with other students. And the first is create a positive learning environment. So how can we create a positive learning environment in our classroom? Of course, students are different. They are of different cultural and family background. They have different skills, abilities, and of course, as we are talking about, they have learning difficulties. And some students, for some students, some students are good at exact sciences, at mathematics, or some students are good in literature. Some of them are good in arts, and some are good in language acquisition. And there are students even students without any learning difficulties, they also make mistakes. They also have problems. And instead of focusing on what those students who have these difficulties, instead of focusing on what they cannot do, try to address try to find areas that these students are finding success in. If they are finding success even in small things, try to use it as a starting point. So because a little success brings them to another success, and that brings them to bigger success. So try to use every opportunity, every moment that these students performing success, and highlight objectives and structure activities clearly. So every time, it's a good idea, every time when you start your lesson, it's a good idea to give a short outline of this classroom, of your class, of your lesson objectives. So if you are going to have a lesson about my family, for example, just briefly give an outline. So students, today we are going to talk about my family, and at the end of this classroom, you will be able to give short information about the members of your family. So it will help the students to prepare their mind to accept new information and absorb new information. And have a set of positive rules. Rules are important in the classroom, so you can think about creative rules and positive rules, of course. By positive rules, what do I mean by positive rules? To this set of rules for a moment. So if you you can collaborate with your students to create a set of rules. Or you can go on the internet and find a lot of creative examples of rules, of classroom rules. But it is very important that you do not include don'ts in your rules, only do's, like don't interrupt each other, or don't answer your teacher's question without raising your hand. Just only do's, only positive rules, like we all belong, we are a team, we do our best, we dream big, and many, many other positive rules. And also, it's very important when teacher creates a positive message to students. So you just, along your rules, you can also create such a positive message to your students. So another strategy, reduce potential distractions. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, those students who suffer from dyslexia, they can be easily distracted by simple things. Try to reduce potential distractions like colorful pictures or any other distractions that can grab the attention from the lesson. And time activity effectively. So try to use your time effectively and try to split the task into smaller tasks so that those students can stay focused on the lesson, on the activity, and utilize and try to use all the senses for learning. As I mentioned at the beginning, try to use, mostly those students are good in when you use kinesthetic aids, when they touch something, when they create something, when they draw something. And there is one activity that I use with my beginner students. It is called picture dictation. Of course, you all know that activity. So when the teacher dictates words and the students, instead of writing the words, they draw pictures. Like you can say cat, and they draw cat. And it also can be a very fun activity, because some students draw a fat cat or a thin cat. And this is very basic activity, but you can extend it. You can make it more, you can develop this activity, like draw your dream house. How do you see your dream house? Or where is it? So ask your students to draw their dream house and also the place where they want to see their house. And that when you continue, you can say, and so enter your house. What do you see inside your house? What furniture or other things inside your house? And then ask them to describe their drawing. What is your dream house like? What do you have in your dream house? Where is it? And why have you chosen this place for your dream house? Also, there are all other strategies, other things that your students with learning difficulties might need, other supports, like giving them more time to complete assignments. Compared to other students, you can give them more time, 5-10 minutes, 5-10 additional minutes, or you can allow your students to use their devices to record your voice or even their voice, and then to listen to that. Or even you can allow them to use computers to do the tests, or to spell check. As we know, dyslexic students have difficulties in spelling. Just allow them to spell check using their computers. And allow them to, if they do not want to answer in front of the classroom, don't push them. Don't put pressure on them. Let them just work if they want to work individually, or if they do not want to really loud in front of the classroom, so that's okay. So conclusion, and when you create in your classroom this friendly atmosphere, when you create accessibility for all students, when you give your students opportunity to demonstrate, even though they are small successes, you can help them, you can support and help them to create confidence and to boost their self-esteem, which is very important for those students. And now I wanted to talk about a project that in our organization that was implemented by our organization. It is called I Am Also a Community Member. And this project was implemented in 2017 with the support of the US Embassy in our village, Khujand. And the project aimed to include 8 students with disabilities who had disabilities from Khujand. Yes, as you can see in the photo, there were 8 students who had 3 months of English courses and also computer science courses. And here are project results. The period was from June to November 2017, and location village Khujand. So the project was aimed to help 8 students with disabilities to master English language skills and also computer skills. In total, they had about 108 hours of English and computer instructions. And the book of English classrooms was Headway Starter. So as you all know, this book is used at universities, at schools even, and most educational centers use this book, Headway Starter. So there wasn't used any special books, just materials, just activities were adapted to the needs of those students. And as a result, 8 students, all of them obtained necessary computer skills and language skills during these 3 months. And also Russian language course. And one of them was able to find a job. 2 of them were able to find a job at school as instructors, as teachers, and the rest of the students, they attended university and colleges after graduation, after graduating from school. So this was the project that was implemented in our organization. So thank you for your attention. This is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Faridun, for such an interesting and informative presentation. So, we have lots of questions in the chat box. So if you want to answer those questions, you can answer them. And of course, we welcome more questions from our participants.
Okay. Let me start from the very beginning. Yes, how do these strategies work during the lessons? This is one question from Natia Devitashvili. So the strategies working with students with dyslexic, you meant, I suppose. So those strategies work not only for students with dyslexic or students who have learning difficulties. They are just best teaching practices, because if they work with with those students who have those difficulties, they will definitely work with all your students. And as I mentioned, do not indicate that this lesson or this activity is specially adapted for a group of students or for an individual. Just without any indications to their disabilities or to their difficulties. Because we know even for those students who do not have any learning difficulties, acquisition of foreign language can be a real challenge. So at the very beginning, those strategies are good teaching practices. Another question is, how can teachers be ready for all the students with different learning styles? How possible is it? Yes, that is a good question. As I mentioned, it is very teaching for teachers, very challenging for teachers to follow that balance between the students who need special approach and the students who are really doing well. They do not want to hold them behind, and they do not want them to get bored during the classes, and this is really challenging. But we are teachers, so we need to be flexible. We always need to look for new and different approaches in teaching, using activities, using methodologies that are different. Every time when you use every lesson, when you use different approach, different activities, they will benefit different students. Yes, how possible is it, Res? You are right that it is really difficult because if you have 12 students in your classroom, I'm not talking about large classes of 20 and 30 students at schools, at middle schools. When you have 12 students, you have 12 unique individuals. All of them are unique. They have different skills, different abilities, different needs. So it is really difficult to decide how you can adapt your activity or your materials. But there was one strategy, there was one tip. You can divide your classroom into smaller groups. Just every small group is one center. So, and give them different assignments, not one assignment for all the class, for all groups, but give them different assignments and ask them at the end to demonstrate their work. Focusing on student achievements. Yes, thank you, Malime. Glorofon Turayve, thank you. Yes, for your point. I totally agree with that. Yes, focusing on student achievements works not only in class where there are students with disabilities. I think students do their best when they know that their efforts are appreciated by their teacher. Yes, I totally agree with you. Yes, you don't need to have students with learning difficulties in your classroom in order to praise your students. Even though you do not have those students, yes, always try to motivate your students. Yes, you are right, to appreciate their achievements and success. Yes, thank you, Natia Devitashvili. You're right. I think it's better to create rules with students and focus on positive things. Back drawing is also a great one. Excellent. Thank you for your idea. You are right. When you decide with your class what rules they want to have, it will be perfect when the students themselves create rules, positive rules, of course. So Parvin Sodiqova, she says, for me, it's really hard to make an environment to speak. So regarding to this question, how to make an environment to speak. So it's of course difficult to make your students to speak. Just imagine, because they are using a new language, and of course they cannot avoid mistakes. But try to somehow explain, they need somehow to realize that making mistakes is okay. Even when we speak our native language, we also make a lot of mistakes. So it's okay when they make mistakes. So we learn from our mistakes. Also, it's a good idea to include this rule into your set of rules. We learn from our mistakes. So do not, when students are having a speaking activity, of course, they will make a lot of mistakes, grammar mistakes, or they will make mistakes in word order. It's important, of course, that teachers help them to correct their mistakes, but don't stop them. Do not stop them while they are speaking and say that you made a mistake. You made a grammatical mistake. You use past tense instead of present perfect or opposite. Just let them speak. And then at the end, you can, when knowing your weak points of your students, you can work on this, on their weak points. If they have difficulties in tenses, work on tenses. If they have difficulties in word order, try to design activities to help them overcome this challenge. Picture dictation is a fun activity. We tried it in the EWB conference. Yes, Malime, I remember that activity. Yes, you can make it a real fun in your classroom, picture dictation. Ilham is asking, what is your advice who work in the villages who far from modern technologies? Yes, you're right, Ilham. For those who work in the remote areas, access to the internet and access to modern technologies is really difficult. But at least you have, maybe in your classroom, not even not all your students, but at least you have a computer or you have a device where you can get access to the internet. And there are a lot of websites for where you can find great activities, great strategies to work and to use in your classroom. Just bring those activities into your classroom. It isn't necessary that all your students should have access to the internet or access to technologies. It's just enough when you have that access, and just bring those activities into your classroom. Yes, there is one good question from Timur Maikami. What would you advise parents of children with this kind of disabilities? Yes, thank you for it's a very good question. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it is when teachers or when parents do not understand their children's difficulties, it will create a lot of problems to them. So first of all, it is crucial that parents understand that their children have these difficulties, and the teachers and collaboration between teachers and parents is important. When teachers first of all try to find more information about those disabilities or about those difficulties that the students have, and try to work together with the parents, because the parents might think that the children showing unwillingness in learning, their children are lazy or do not want to learn. But try to show them, when you work with those students, try to show the parents their success. If they are good in creativity, try to show them that they are creative. Or if they are good in drawing even, try to show them their success in drawing. don't point out their mistakes or don't point out those areas that they feel difficulty. And parents also, it's important that parents support their children and praise their successes to help them stay motivated and build confidence. Yes, activities for those students must be easy, I guess. What about the rest of the class? Yes, I talked about it at the beginning. Students with higher level. And again, as I mentioned a lot of times, it's really difficult to strike that balance between those students and the students with higher level. And again, just to find that point that is between the higher level students and the students who have difficulties, and try to use it as a starting point. And also try to make your class to try to your students, those students of with higher level, to collaborate with the students who have difficulties in learning. When peer-to-peer support, when they support each other, when they try to help them not to stay behind. So it is also very important in the classroom. Do you support, a question from Parvina Yakubova, do you support the idea of putting students with disabilities along with other students who don't have problems? Yes, I support this idea, because do not divide your classroom. As we said, our goal to make an inclusive class, an accessible class for all students. If you distinguish your class, if you divide your class into parts, there will be no point. It is better to divide them in different groups. One group of students with disabilities and one group of students who don't have any problems, and to teach them in different times, but there won't be any point. So I support the idea that when you put your students who do not have any problems along with students who have disabilities or learning difficulties, let us say, we always try to use this phrase, students with learning difficulties or students with special needs. Yes, definitely. Thank you, Malima, for your point. Yes. Those students with dyslexia have good abilities to learn by heart poem, etc. Can we use this ability to learning by heart in teaching English, learning English words? Yes, that's a good question. So you mean learning by heart words? Yes, we can use this technique when students try to learn by heart words, but at the same time, they must be able to use these words to express their thoughts using these words. So yes, try to use this technique, but in a practical way when they create something with those words, because it's very important when they can create something, not just learning by heart. Yes, okay, Firuz, thank you. I agree with you. Students with dyslexia, mostly they are kinesthetic. Yes, they are kinesthetic learners. They learn by touching things. Yes, they learn by movement. When they move around, when they touch things, when they do something, when there is a lot of movement in the classroom. Yes, right you are. They want to see and listen, but not to read, because you know that reading is a big problem. So listened or watching is better, will work better for those students. Yes, how to motivate, and there's a question from Faridun Yunusov, how to motivate them to speak around friends in English. So you mean to speak aloud in front of other students? And so I think that one way to motivate them is not indicating their mistakes, is not paying attention to their mistakes. When you encourage them every of their success, so you can support and motivate them. Another question, do our society ready to enroll disability students to our usual schools? So why not? Because so I think students with disabilities, as in one of my slides, I showed very popular and famous people, artists, actors, inventors, who had disability, who had when they were at school, they had learning difficulties, dyslexia, and you see that mostly students who have this kind of disorder, dyslexia, they are very creative and their imagination is developed. So it is okay when at schools we have students with learning difficulties along with other students. But for teachers, it is up to teachers. The role of a teacher is important here and also adapted curriculum, the collaboration between teachers and parents of those children, and of course, creating friendly atmosphere in classroom. Thank you, Firdaus, for your comment. There's another question from Natia Devitashvili. Do students know how to act with them? Sometimes it's hard for teachers. I totally agree with you that sometimes it's hard for teachers. And yes, students, do they know how to act with those students who have learning difficulties? Of course, we teachers, we are in the classroom and we need to create that atmosphere where all students are engaged in all activities in the learning process. So if you need to set a good example for the rest of the class. The way you treat those students will be a great examples for other students. Don't think about those students about that they are that they need some special treatment. They are just ordinary students as others. They only have different needs. Maybe they are very creative, but they have difficulties in reading or in writing. Or they are very and their imagination is improved, is developed. Thank you, Ilham, for your comment.
Thank you, Faridun, for such a great presentation. So you shared your own experience and also just the experience of your organization, which is very good. And I believe that lots of people who will be watching this webinar, they will also ask you questions afterwards. So because this is something very natural, because nowadays, you know, the classes becoming more inclusive, and lots of students who are learning English, they have like different abilities and particularly like learning abilities, and therefore for the teachers it's very important to stay on the same way with the students and to know about their needs, and also just to address those needs using an individual approach to the students. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me remind you, dear audience, that today we had a webinar with Faridun Yunusov, who shared with us about how to, who shared with us how to teach English to people with disabilities and with different learning abilities. Thank you very much, Faridun. And
Yes, you're welcome.
yeah, and I also, on behalf of all English Without Borders Network, I express our deep gratitude to our speaker today, as well as to our participants who has joined us via Facebook and also via Zoom platform. Huge thank you to all of you, and please stay tuned on us. And next week we are going to have Judy Elliott as our speaker. Please follow our posts and join our webinar. So thank you very much. Have a great evening, everybody, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.